Have you ever wondered why some of the biggest companies in the world suffer massive data breaches even after spending millions of dollars on cybersecurity? The answer is surprising. In many cases, it is not a hacker, a firewall, or a piece of malware that causes the biggest failure. It is poor security governance, weak risk management, and bad business decisions. These are exactly the concepts that the CISSP exam tests, and mastering them can be the difference between passing or failing the certification, and between protecting or exposing an entire organization. So stay with me until the end, because every section builds on the last, and I'll also show you where to download a free CISSP study guide with the most important exam questions and key concepts from the link in the description. Welcome to the first section of your CISSP ISC2 Certified Information Systems Security Professional preparation journey. In this lesson, you will build the foundation that every successful CISSP candidate needs by learning security governance, risk management, compliance, and asset protection. More importantly, you will discover how security professionals think beyond technology to align cybersecurity with business objectives, legal requirements, and organizational strategy. These concepts appear throughout the CISSP exam and form the framework for many scenario-based questions. So clear your mind, stay focused, and let's begin building the knowledge that will move you one step closer to earning your CISSP certification. We will start with the absolute foundation of information security known as the CIA triad. The CIA triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Every single security control you implement in your career will tie back to at least one of these three core principles. Confidentiality ensures that only authorized individuals can view sensitive data. Integrity ensures that data remains accurate and has not been improperly modified. Availability guarantees that authorized users have reliable access to systems and data whenever they need them. Understanding how security fits into the overall business is known as security governance. Governance is all about management support, organizational structure, and ensuring that security goals perfectly match the business goals. If your company makes money by selling shoes online, your security strategy must protect the online shopping cart and customer data without making it too difficult for people to buy shoes. For the exam, always remember that security is a business enabler, not just an isolated information technology function. To enforce security governance, organizations use policies, standards, guidelines, and procedures. A security policy is a high-level document created by senior management that states the overall security goals of the organization. Think of the policy as the law of the land. Standards are mandatory rules that support the policy, such as requiring specific types of hardware. Guidelines are highly recommended but optional suggestions. Procedures are the detailed, step-by-step instructions on how to actually implement the standards and policies. Let us move into the crucial topic of risk management, which is the process of identifying, evaluating, and responding to threats. You cannot eliminate all risk because doing business naturally involves taking chances. Instead, the goal is to reduce risk to an acceptable level that senior management agrees upon. We evaluate risk by looking at assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. An asset is anything valuable to the company, a threat is a potential danger, and a vulnerability is a weakness that a threat could exploit. When you assess risk, you can use qualitative or quantitative methods. Qualitative risk assessment is subjective and uses words like high, medium, or low to describe the likelihood and impact of a threat. It is fast, requires no complex math, and uses expert judgment. Quantitative risk assessment is objective and uses actual dollar amounts to calculate potential financial losses. The exam will expect you to know that quantitative risk assessment requires highly reliable data and takes much more time to complete than qualitative assessment. For quantitative risk assessment, you must understand a few basic formulas. The single loss expectancy is the dollar amount the company loses if a specific risk happens exactly one time. The annualized rate of occurrence is how many times you expect that risk to happen in one single year. If you multiply the single loss expectancy by the annualized rate of occurrence, you get the annualized loss expectancy. The annualized loss expectancy is the total amount of money the company expects to lose from that risk over a full year, which tells management exactly how much they should spend to prevent it. Once you understand the level of risk, management must decide how to handle it. You have four main options for handling risk, which are mitigation, transference, acceptance, and avoidance. Risk mitigation means implementing security controls to reduce the danger, like installing a firewall. Risk transference means paying someone else to take the risk, like buying cybersecurity insurance. Risk acceptance means doing nothing because the cost to fix the problem is higher than the potential financial loss. Risk avoidance means completely stopping the risky activity, like shutting down a vulnerable website entirely. Before you can protect anything, you need to know what you have, which brings us to asset classification. Asset classification involves assigning a value or sensitivity level to data and hardware. A common classification scheme for private companies includes public, internal, confidential, and restricted data. For the exam, you need to know that the data owner is the person responsible for deciding the classification level of the data. By classifying assets, you ensure that the most valuable data receives the strongest and most expensive protection. The exam frequently tests your understanding of different security roles regarding data. As mentioned, the data owner is usually a senior business manager who holds ultimate responsibility for the data and decides its classification. The data custodian is a technical professional who actually implements the technical controls to protect the data, like performing backups and setting permissions. The system owner is responsible for the overall computer systems where the data lives. Finally, the end user is the person who simply accesses the data to perform their daily job duties. You must also understand the distinct difference between privacy and security. Security focuses on protecting data from unauthorized access, alteration, or destruction. Privacy focuses on respecting the rights of individuals and controlling how their personal information is collected, used, and shared. You can easily have security without privacy, but you cannot have privacy without security. Organizations must build security programs that actively support legal privacy requirements to protect both employee and customer information. Security professionals must constantly navigate a complex web of legal and regulatory requirements. Compliance means following external laws, industry regulations, and internal organizational policies. Different industries have specific rules, like the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act for healthcare data or the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard for credit card processing. Failing to comply with these regulations can result in massive financial fines and severe damage to the reputation of the organization. Ignorance of the law is never an acceptable excuse on the exam. Protecting intellectual property is a major focus in modern business environments. Intellectual property includes creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary works, and unique designs. You protect intellectual property using patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Patents protect new inventions for a limited time. Trademarks protect logos and brand names used in commerce. Copyrights protect original creative works like software code and training manuals. Trade secrets are valuable business practices or formulas that must be kept strictly confidential to maintain a competitive advantage. To proactively defend against attacks, security professionals use a process called threat modeling. Threat modeling is a structured way of identifying and prioritizing potential threats to a system during the design phase. By thinking exactly like an attacker, you can discover design flaws before the software is actually built. The STRIDE model is a very common threat modeling framework you need to know. STRIDE helps you categorize threats into spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. The biggest vulnerability in any security system is often the human element, which is why personnel security is critical. Personnel security starts before an employee is even hired, utilizing background checks and reference verification. Once hired, employees must sign acceptable use policies and non-disclosure agreements to ensure they clearly understand the rules. For the exam, remember that comprehensive security training and awareness programs are the single most effective ways to reduce human-related security incidents. 2 crucial personnel security principles you will be tested on are separation of duties and least privilege. Separation of duties means dividing a critical task among multiple people so that no single person can commit fraud alone. For example, the person who writes the company checks should not be the same person who signs the checks. Least privilege means giving users exactly the minimum amount of access they need to perform their jobs, and absolutely nothing more. Both concepts significantly reduce internal threats and limit the damage of accidental mistakes. Organizations also use job rotation and mandatory vacations to actively detect fraud and reduce risk. Job rotation involves moving employees through different roles, which prevents one person from having absolute control over a specific process for too long. Mandatory vacations require employees to take time off while someone else covers their daily duties. If an employee is secretly running a fraudulent scheme, it will highly likely be discovered when another person temporarily takes over their responsibilities during their vacation. The offboarding or termination process is a highly sensitive security event that must be managed carefully. When an employee leaves the company, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, their system access must be revoked immediately. This prevents a disgruntled former employee from logging back in to steal data or cause damage. You must also ensure they return all company-owned hardware, identification badges, and physical keys. A standardized exit interview and a structured offboarding checklist are essential tools to manage this risk effectively. The final key concept in this first section is business continuity planning. Business continuity is the strategic effort to ensure critical business functions can continue operating during and after a major disruption. It focuses on keeping the entire business alive, not just fixing the computer systems. A proper business continuity plan always starts with a business impact analysis to identify critical processes and determine exactly how much downtime the company can survive. This analysis gives management the data they need to prioritize recovery efforts and allocate proper funding. I want to sincerely congratulate you for completing the very first section of this extensive course. You now have a solid understanding of security governance, risk management, and how to properly protect organizational assets. To lock this new knowledge into your brain, please complete the attached practice test for this section. Answering practice questions is scientifically proven to improve long-term retention and build the confidence you need for the actual exam. The practice test is included right here with this lesson, so take advantage of it to measure your progress. Stay focused, stay motivated, and I will see you in the next section where we explore security architecture and engineering. Welcome to the second section of our course where we transition into security architecture and engineering. In this lesson, you will learn how to design, build, and maintain secure information systems from the ground up. This topic is incredibly important because if a computer system is built on a weak foundation, no amount of security patching will ever make it truly safe. Prepare to explore the fascinating world of cryptography, security models, and physical defense mechanisms. Take a moment to clear your mind, get comfortable, and let us build the technical knowledge you need to succeed. At the core of security engineering is the concept of trust within a computer system. The central processing unit of a computer uses protection rings to separate trusted core operating system functions from untrusted user applications. Ring 0 is the most trusted area where the operating system kernel lives, while outer rings are used for regular applications like your web browser. For the exam, you must understand that processes in outer, less trusted rings must never be allowed to directly access or modify the highly trusted processes running in ring 0. To manage access within these computer systems, we use formalized security models. The first major model you need to know is the Bell-LaPadula model, which was created by the military and focuses entirely on confidentiality. It uses a rule called no read up, meaning a user with secret clearance cannot read top secret documents. It also uses a rule called no write down, meaning a user cannot accidentally copy a top secret document into an unclassified folder, which prevents sensitive information from leaking out to unauthorized people. While the military focuses heavily on confidentiality, businesses often care more about the accuracy of their data, which brings us to the Bieber model. The Bieber model focuses entirely on integrity to ensure data is not corrupted or modified by unauthorized users. It uses the exact opposite rules of Bell-LaPadula. Bieber enforces no read down, meaning a trusted process should not read untrusted data, and no write up, meaning an untrusted user cannot modify highly trusted, critical system data. Another important integrity model used primarily in the commercial world is the Clark-Wilson model. While Bieber focuses on data levels, Clark-Wilson focuses on well-formed transactions and separation of duties. It ensures that users cannot change data directly, but must use a specific, trusted application to make those changes. For example, a bank teller cannot just manually change your account balance in a database. They must use the official banking software, which perfectly records and audits the transaction to maintain strict data integrity. Moving past structural models, we enter the world of cryptography, which is the science of hiding information. Cryptography is used to protect data resting on your hard drive and data moving across a network. When you have readable data, we call it plain text. You use a mathematical algorithm and a secret digital key to scramble that plain text into unreadable data, which is called ciphertext. To read the message again, the authorized person simply uses a key to decrypt the ciphertext back into readable plain text. There are two main types of cryptography, starting with symmetric cryptography. In a symmetric system, both the sender and the receiver use the exact same secret key to encrypt and decrypt the data. The biggest advantage of symmetric cryptography is that it is extremely fast and perfect for encrypting massive amounts of data, like an entire computer hard drive. The Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, is the most popular symmetric algorithm used today, and you will definitely see it on your exam. The second type is asymmetric cryptography, which solves the problem of how to securely share keys over the internet. Asymmetric cryptography uses a mathematically linked pair of keys known as a public key and a private key. You share your public key with the entire world, but you keep your private key highly secured and secret. If someone wants to send you a secure message, they encrypt it with your public key, and because of the mathematical link, only your specific private key can decrypt it. Cryptography is not just for hiding data, it is also used to prove data has not been altered through a process called hashing. A hash is a one-way mathematical algorithm that takes a file of any size and converts it into a unique, fixed-length string of characters. If you change even one single letter in the original file, the resulting hash value will change completely. By comparing hash values before and after downloading a file, you can mathematically prove the integrity of that file. By combining hashing and asymmetric cryptography, we can create digital signatures. A digital signature provides non-repudiation, meaning the sender cannot later deny that they sent the message. To create a digital signature, the sender hashes their message and then encrypts that hash with their own private key. When the receiver gets the message, they use the sender's public key to decrypt the hash, which mathematically proves exactly who sent it and ensures the message was not modified in transit. To manage all of these public and private keys on a global scale, we use a public key infrastructure. The heart of a public key infrastructure is a trusted third-party organization called a certificate authority. The certificate authority verifies the identity of a person or a website and issues them a digital certificate, which safely binds their identity to their public key. When your web browser sees a little padlock icon next to a website address, it means a certificate authority has verified that website is legitimate and secure. While digital security is fascinating, it is completely useless if someone can simply walk into your building and steal your servers, which is why physical security is critical. Physical security starts at the perimeter of your property using fences, gates, and proper lighting to naturally deter attackers. We also use a concept called crime prevention through environmental design, which involves landscaping, building layout, and natural visibility to make the physical environment hostile to criminal activity. Once inside the building, we must control physical access using security guards, locked doors, and identification badges. A common physical security threat is tailgating, where an unauthorized person closely follows an authorized employee through a secure door before it closes. To prevent tailgating, high security areas use a man-trap, which is a small room with two doors where the first door must close and lock completely before the second door will open. Protecting the data center itself requires strict environmental controls. You must manage the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning to prevent servers from literally melting down due to extreme heat. You must also implement specialized fire suppression systems that use gas rather than water to put out fires without destroying the electronic equipment. Finally, you need an uninterruptible power supply and backup diesel generators to ensure your systems stay online even during a massive regional power outage. When engineering secure systems, you must always follow the principle of defense in depth. Defense in depth means layering multiple, different types of security controls so that if one fails, another is there to catch the attacker. For example, if a hacker bypasses your network firewall, they still have to get past the antivirus software on the server, and then they still have to crack the database encryption. Multiple layers of defense significantly slow down attackers and give you time to respond effectively. Another core engineering principle is failing securely. When a computer system crashes or experiences an error, it must default to a secure state rather than an open state. If a security system regulating a locked electronic door loses power, failing securely means the door remains locked to keep intruders out, which is very common for military facilities. However, if human safety is involved, such as in a hospital, failing safely might mean the doors automatically unlock so people can escape a fire. Modern security architecture relies heavily on cloud computing, which you must absolutely understand for the exam. Cloud computing comes in three main deployment models, which are public, private, and hybrid. A public cloud is owned by a provider like Amazon or Microsoft and shared among many different companies. A private cloud is built and used exclusively by one single organization. A hybrid cloud is simply a combination of both, allowing a company to keep highly sensitive data private while using the public cloud for less critical workloads. You must also clearly understand cloud service models and the shared responsibility model. Infrastructure as a service provides raw virtual servers, meaning you are responsible for securing the operating system and the applications. Platform as a service provides a ready-to-use database or coding environment, shifting more security responsibility to the cloud provider. Software as a service provides a fully finished application like webmail, where the provider handles almost all security, but you are still always legally responsible for your own data. Finally, whether you are building systems in the cloud or in your own data center, you must carefully manage the lifecycle of your cryptographic keys. Key management involves securely generating keys, storing them safely, rotating them regularly, and eventually destroying them when they are no longer needed. If an attacker steals your master encryption keys, all of your fancy cryptographic algorithms and expensive firewalls become completely worthless because the attacker can easily unlock everything. I want to sincerely congratulate you for finishing this very heavy and technical section on security architecture and engineering. You now understand how to design secure systems, apply cryptography, and protect your physical environment. I strongly encourage you to complete the attached practice test to reinforce these complex concepts. Taking practice questions immediately after learning new material is the best way to improve your retention and exam readiness. The practice test is included right here with this lesson, so please dive in and challenge yourself. Keep up this excellent momentum, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle communication and network security. Welcome to the third section of our course, where we explore the critical world of communication and network security. In this lesson, you will learn how to protect the digital lifelines that connect modern organizations to the world. Understanding network security is essential because data is constantly moving, and it is highly vulnerable to interception or disruption while traveling across the internet. Get ready to understand how data flows, how to build secure network architecture, and how to defend against devastating network attacks. Take a moment to focus, and let us build the networking knowledge you need to ace this exam. To truly understand networking, we must start with the Open Systems Interconnection Model, commonly known as the OSI model. The OSI model is a conceptual framework divided into 7 distinct layers that explains exactly how computers communicate over a network. It is not a physical piece of software you install, but rather a universal language that helps network engineers and security professionals troubleshoot problems. For the exam, you must memorize these 7 layers, which start at the bottom with the physical layer and move all the way up to the application layer. Layer 1 is the physical layer, which involves the actual cables, radio frequencies, and electrical signals that transmit raw data bits. Layer 2 is the data link layer, which organizes those bits into frames and uses media access control addresses, or MAC addresses, to send data between devices on the same local network. Switches operate at Layer 2, creating the internal network connections within an office building. If an attacker physically cuts a network cable or unplugs a switch, they are launching a Layer 1 or Layer 2 attack. Layer 3 is the network layer, and this is where routing happens. This layer uses Internet Protocol addresses, or IP addresses, to move data packets across completely different networks, such as sending an email from your home network to a corporate server in another country. Routers operate at Layer 3, acting like traffic cops that determine the fastest and most efficient path for data to travel. Without Layer 3 and routing protocols, the global Internet simply would not exist. Layer 4 is the transport layer, which is responsible for how data is delivered, using either the Transmission Control Protocol or the User Datagram Protocol. Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, is highly reliable and guarantees that data arrives exactly as intended, making it perfect for downloading files or loading web pages. User Datagram Protocol, or UDP, focuses purely on maximum speed rather than reliability, making it the standard choice for live video streaming and online gaming where a few dropped frames are acceptable. The top 3 layers focus on preparing the data for the actual software application. Layer 5 is the session layer, which establishes, maintains, and securely terminates connections between 2 computers. Layer 6 is the presentation layer, which handles data formatting, encryption, and compression so the receiving computer can easily understand the incoming data. Finally, Layer 7 is the application layer, which provides the actual network services to your software applications, such as your web browser fetching a secure website. While the OSI model is a theoretical concept, the TCP IP model is the practical protocol suite actually used on the Internet today. The TCP IP model condenses the 7 OSI layers into just 4 layers, which are the network access layer, the Internet layer, the host-to-host transport layer, and the application layer. You must understand how these 2 models map to each other, because the exam will test your ability to translate troubleshooting concepts between the theoretical OSI model and the real-world TCP IP model. Every device on a network needs a logical address to communicate, which brings us to Internet Protocol addressing. We currently use 2 versions of IP addresses, known as IPv4 and IPv6. IPv4 uses a 32-bit address format, which means the world completely ran out of available addresses several years ago. To solve this critical shortage, engineers created IPv6, which uses a massive 128-bit address format, providing enough unique IP addresses for every single device on the planet for the foreseeable future. From a security perspective, you never want all of your devices sitting on one massive, flat network, which is why we use network segmentation. Segmentation involves dividing a large network into smaller, isolated sub-networks, often using virtual local area networks or VLANs. By separating your guest Wi-Fi network from your sensitive human resources network, you ensure that a visitor cannot easily scan or attack your internal corporate servers. Network segmentation is one of the most effective ways to contain an attack and limit lateral movement. To control the traffic flowing between these segmented networks, we use firewalls. A firewall is a network security device that monitors incoming and outgoing traffic and decides whether to allow or block specific traffic based on a defined set of security rules. Modern organizations use stateful firewalls, which are smart enough to remember the context of active connections, ensuring that only legitimate responses to requested traffic are allowed back into the internal network. While a firewall acts as a security guard at the door, an intrusion detection system acts like the security cameras inside the building. An intrusion detection system quietly monitors network traffic for suspicious activity or known attack signatures and sends an alert to the security team if it sees something dangerous. An intrusion prevention system goes one step further by actively dropping the malicious traffic and blocking the attacker in real time, stopping the threat before it reaches the target server. When employees work remotely, they need a safe way to access internal corporate resources over the public, untrusted internet. To achieve this, organizations use a virtual private network, or VPN, which creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between the remote user and the corporate office. For the exam, you should know that IPsec is the most common protocol suite used to establish these secure VPN tunnels, providing strict confidentiality and integrity for all data passing through the connection. Wireless networks introduce significant security challenges because radio waves travel through the air and can easily bleed outside the physical walls of your building. This means an attacker can simply sit in the parking lot and intercept your wireless traffic if it is not properly encrypted. WPA3 is the current and most secure encryption standard for Wi-Fi networks, and you must completely avoid using older, broken standards like WEP, which can be cracked by an attacker in a matter of minutes. Securing the physical network devices themselves is just as important as securing the traffic flowing through them. When you install a new router or switch, you must immediately change the default manufacturer passwords, as hackers maintain lists of these default credentials. You should also disable any unused physical ports on the switch, so an unauthorized person cannot simply walk into an office, plug a laptop into a wall jack, and gain instant access to the corporate network. One of the most common threats to network availability is a denial-of-service attack. In a denial-of-service attack, a hacker floods a target server with overwhelming amounts of fake network traffic, causing the server to crash or become so slow that legitimate customers cannot access it. A distributed denial-of-service attack uses thousands of compromised computers, known as a botnet, to launch the attack simultaneously, making it incredibly difficult to block because the bad traffic is coming from all over the world. Another dangerous threat is the man-in-the-middle attack, where an attacker secretly intercepts and relays communication between two parties who believe they are speaking directly to each other. The attacker can secretly read sensitive information or even modify the data before sending it along. The best defense against a man-in-the-middle attack is strong encryption and mutual authentication, which guarantees that both parties mathematically prove their identities before exchanging any sensitive data. Attackers frequently use spoofing techniques to bypass network security controls by pretending to be a trusted device. In MAC spoofing, an attacker changes the physical address of their network card to match the address of a legitimate corporate laptop, hoping to bypass security filters. In IP spoofing, the attacker modifies the source IP address in the network packet so the firewall mistakenly believes the malicious traffic is coming from a trusted internal server rather than an external threat. You must also understand how attackers exploit essential network protocols, such as the address resolution protocol and the domain name system. ARP poisoning involves sending fake messages to link the attacker's MAC address with the IP address of the default network gateway, allowing them to intercept all local traffic. DNS poisoning involves corrupting the Internet Directory System, secretly redirecting users to a fake, malicious website even when they type the correct, legitimate web address into their browser. To enforce security policies before a device is allowed onto the network, organizations implement network access control. Network access control systems inspect the health of a connecting laptop or mobile device, checking to see if the antivirus software is updated and the operating system is fully patched. If the device fails the health check, the network access control system automatically places it into an isolated quarantine network where it cannot harm other computers until the security issues are fixed. I want to sincerely congratulate you for completing the third section of our course. You now have a solid understanding of network models, secure network architecture, and how to defend against modern communication threats. To ensure you retain these critical concepts, please complete the attached practice test for this section. Practicing with exam-like questions is the best way to improve your memory retention and prepare for the real test. The practice questions are included with this lesson, so please dive into them right away. Stay positive, keep up your excellent study habits, and I will see you in the next section where we tackle identity and access management. Welcome to the fourth section of our course, where we will dive into the critical domain of identity and access management. In this lesson, you will learn how to properly control exactly who gets into your systems and what they are allowed to do once they are inside. This topic is absolutely vital because compromised user credentials are the leading cause of major data breaches in the modern business world. Prepare to master the concepts of authentication, access control models, and user lifecycle management. Take a deep breath, focus your attention, and let us build the knowledge you need to confidently answer these questions on exam day. The entire process of identity and access management is built upon four fundamental steps, which are identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. You must understand how these distinct steps work together in a sequence to protect organizational resources. If you think about getting onto an airplane, identification is stating your name, authentication is showing your passport, authorization is having a valid boarding pass for a specific seat, and accountability is the airline keeping a record that you actually boarded the flight. Identification is the very first step in the process, which occurs when a user simply claims to be a specific person. In a computer system, identification usually happens when you type in a username or an email address. By itself, identification provides absolutely no security because usernames are generally public information that anyone can easily guess or discover. Identification simply tells the security system which user profile it needs to look up in the database to start the next phase of the process. Authentication is the second step, where the system demands that the user actually prove their claimed identity is genuine. To prove who you are, you must provide an authentication factor, and the most common factor is something you know. Something you know is a secret piece of information that only the real user should possess, such as a password, a numeric personal identification number, or the answers to specific security questions. While passwords are very common, they are also easily stolen or forgotten, making them the weakest form of authentication. To strengthen security, organizations use a second authentication factor known as something you have. Something you have refers to a physical object that the user holds in their possession. This could be a specialized smart card, a hardware token that generates temporary numeric codes, or even an application on a registered mobile phone. If a hacker steals your password but does not physically have your mobile phone in their hands, they still cannot successfully log into your account. The third major authentication factor is something you are, which utilizes biometric measurements of the human body. Biometrics include physical characteristics like fingerprints, retinal scans, facial recognition, or even the unique geometry of a human hand. Because these physical traits are incredibly difficult to fake and impossible to accidentally forget at home, biometrics offer the highest level of security for verifying human identity. However, biometric systems are expensive to implement and can create privacy concerns for employees. For the exam, you must clearly understand the concept of multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication requires a user to provide two or more completely different categories of authentication factors to gain access. For example, using a password, which is something you know, along with a fingerprint scan, which is something you are, represents true multi-factor authentication. Using two passwords is not multi-factor authentication, because you are simply using the something you know category twice, which does not significantly increase security against a targeted attack. Once the system securely authenticates the user, the third step is authorization. Authorization determines exactly what actions the authenticated user is allowed to perform on the system, such as reading a file, deleting a folder, or printing a confidential document. A normal user might be authorized to only read a specific database, while an administrator is authorized to read, write, and completely delete that same database. The principle of least privilege, which we discussed earlier, heavily dictates how authorization rules are carefully designed. The final step in this process is accountability, which relies on system auditing and logging. Accountability ensures that every action taken on the system can be traced back to one specific, individual user. By maintaining detailed logs of exactly who logged in, what files they opened, and what changes they made, organizations can quickly investigate security incidents and prove who was responsible. Without accountability, it is impossible to conduct digital forensics or legally prosecute an insider threat who intentionally destroys company data. Managing user identities is an ongoing process known as the identity lifecycle, which includes provisioning, reviewing, and deprovisioning. Provisioning happens when a new employee is hired and the system administrator creates their accounts and grants initial access. Regular access reviews must happen continuously throughout their employment to ensure their permissions remain accurate as they change projects or get promoted. Deprovisioning is the immediate removal of all access the moment an employee leaves the organization, completely neutralizing the risk of unauthorized future access. A common challenge in modern business is that employees often need to access dozens of different applications every single day, leading to password fatigue. To solve this, organizations use single sign-on technologies. Single sign-on allows a user to authenticate just one time and gain seamless access to all authorized applications without needing to type passwords again. While single sign-on greatly improves productivity and user happiness, it creates a severe single point of failure, meaning if a hacker steals that one central password, they instantly gain access to absolutely everything. While single sign-on usually operates within one single company, federated identity extends this concept across entirely different organizations. Federation establishes a formal trust relationship between different companies, allowing them to safely share user identities. For example, your company might use federation so employees can log into a third-party cloud application using their internal corporate network credentials. The exam frequently mentions SAML and OAuth, which are the primary protocols used to make federated identity and secure authorization actually work across the Internet. Once identities are established, organizations must choose an access control model to protect their files, starting with discretionary access control. In a discretionary access control model, the creator or owner of a file gets to decide exactly who can access it. For example, if you create a spreadsheet on your work computer, you have the full discretion to share it with your coworkers or keep it completely private. This model is very flexible and widely used in commercial operating systems like Windows, but it is highly vulnerable to accidental data leaks caused by careless users. The complete opposite of that flexibility is mandatory access control, which is the strictest model available and is heavily used by military and intelligence agencies. In mandatory access control, the users have no choice in sharing files. Instead, the central operating system strictly enforces access rules based on security labels attached to files and clearance levels assigned to users. If a user tries to access a file labeled top secret, the system automatically blocks them unless they mathematically possess the required top secret clearance level. Most commercial businesses find mandatory access control far too rigid, so they use role-based access control instead. In role-based access control, access is granted strictly based on the job function or role a person holds within the company, rather than their individual identity. If you are hired as a junior accountant, you are simply placed into the accountant role group, which automatically grants you all the specific permissions needed for that job. This model is incredibly scalable and makes managing permissions for thousands of employees very easy and organized. The most advanced model we use today is attribute-based access control, which grants access by evaluating complex rules and context. Attribute-based access control considers variables like the time of day, the physical location of the user, the specific device they are using, and their corporate department. This allows administrators to create highly intelligent rules, such as allowing an executive to view financial data during normal business hours from a trusted corporate laptop, but instantly blocking them if they try to access that exact same data from an unpatched mobile phone on a weekend. When studying biometrics for the exam, you must completely understand how system errors are measured. A false rejection rate happens when a legitimate user is incorrectly denied access by the biometric scanner, which causes frustration but keeps the system secure. A false acceptance rate happens when an unauthorized attacker is accidentally granted access, which is a massive security failure. The point where the false rejection rate and the false acceptance rate perfectly cross each other on a graph is called the crossover error rate, and a lower crossover error rate proves that the biometric system is highly accurate and reliable. Even with advanced technologies, passwords remain a daily reality, which means you must understand strong password policies. A strong password policy requires significant length, complex characters, and regular rotation to prevent attacks. However, modern security guidance strongly recommends using passphrases instead of complex passwords. A passphrase is a long string of simple, unrelated words that is incredibly easy for a human to memorize, but mathematically devastating for a hacker's computer to guess during a brute force attack. A silent but highly dangerous threat in access management is known as privilege creep. Privilege creep occurs over time when an employee changes job roles within a company and receives new permissions, but their old, unnecessary permissions are never removed. Eventually, this regular employee accumulates dangerous levels of administrative access that they absolutely do not need for their current job. The only effective defense against privilege creep is conducting strict, mandatory access reviews on a regular basis to strip away any unneeded access rights. I want to sincerely congratulate you for completing the 4th section of our course. You now have a comprehensive understanding of authentication factors, access control models, and how to securely manage user lifecycles. To ensure you completely retain this vital information, please take a few moments to complete the attached practice test for this section. Reviewing practice questions actively builds the cognitive pathways you need to recall these technical details under exam pressure. The practice test is included with this lesson, so please utilize it right now. Stay motivated, trust the learning process, and I will see you in the next section where we cover security assessment, testing, and operations. Welcome to the 5th section of our course where we dive into security assessment, testing, and operations. In this lesson, you will learn how to bridge the gap between theoretical security plans and the daily realities of running a live environment. You will discover how to actively hunt for vulnerabilities, respond to devastating cyber attacks, and ensure your business survives catastrophic disasters. This topic is incredibly exciting because this is where all your security knowledge gets put to the ultimate real-world test on the front lines. Get comfortable, clear your mind, and let us prepare you for the operational challenges you will face as a certified professional. To maintain a secure environment, we must constantly look for weaknesses using vulnerability assessments. A vulnerability assessment uses automated software tools to scan your servers, network devices, and applications for known security flaws, missing patches, or weak configurations. It simply identifies and reports the problems so your engineering team can fix them. For the exam, remember that a vulnerability scan is passive, meaning it only looks for open doors but never actually attempts to walk through them or cause damage to the system. When you actually want to prove that a weakness can be successfully attacked, you perform a penetration test. Penetration testing, or ethical hacking, goes a massive step further than a vulnerability scan by actively exploiting the discovered flaws to see exactly how far a hacker could get. Because penetration testing can accidentally crash servers and disrupt business, you must always have clearly defined rules of engagement and explicit, written permission from senior management before you ever begin testing. The exam expects you to know the three main types of penetration testing based on how much knowledge the attacker is given. In a black box test, the ethical hacker is given absolutely zero background information about the target network, perfectly simulating an outside attack. In a white box test, the tester is given full access to network diagrams and source code, making the test much faster and more comprehensive. A gray box test sits right in the middle, providing the tester with partial knowledge, similar to what a regular internal employee might have. Another vital assessment tool is the security audit. While vulnerability scans and penetration tests focus on technical flaws, an audit focuses on processes and compliance. A security audit is an independent review that compares the actual, daily security practices of an organization against its own written policies or external regulatory standards. Audits can be conducted by internal staff to prepare for official reviews, but external auditors are required when a company needs independent, legal proof that they are following industry regulations. Once we finish assessing our systems, we move into the daily tasks of security operations, starting with configuration management. Configuration management ensures that every single server and computer is built to a secure, standardized baseline and remains in that secure state over time. If a system administrator makes an unauthorized change to a server that weakens its security, configuration management tools will immediately detect the deviation and either alert the security team or automatically change the setting back to the secure baseline. A massive part of daily operations is patch management, which is the process of applying software updates to fix known security vulnerabilities. You should never apply a new security patch directly to your live production servers because a poorly written patch can crash critical applications. Instead, proper patch management dictates that updates must always be deployed and monitored in an isolated testing environment first. Only after the patch is proven to be completely safe and stable should it be pushed out to the live business environment. Even with perfect patching, security breaches will inevitably happen, which brings us to the incident response process. Incident management provides a structured, professional way to handle a cyber attack without panicking. You must memorize the 6 standardized steps of incident response for the exam, which are preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. Following these exact steps ensures your team acts quickly, preserves legal evidence, and restores business operations as safely as possible. The first step, preparation, happens long before an attack occurs, involving creating response plans and training the security team. The second step is identification, where you use tools like a security information and event management system to detect abnormal network behavior and declare an official incident. A security information and event management system aggregates millions of log files from all over the company into one central dashboard, using intelligent correlation to spot complex attacks that a human eye would never notice. Once an attack is identified, you move to the third step, which is containment. The absolute priority during containment is stopping the bleeding by isolating the infected computers from the rest of the network so the malware cannot spread any further. After the threat is trapped, you move to the fourth step, eradication, where you actually remove the root cause of the attack. Eradication usually involves completely wiping the infected hard drives and destroying the malware entirely. The fifth step is recovery, where the security team carefully restores the wiped servers from clean backups, installs all missing security patches, and slowly reconnects them to the live network while monitoring for any remaining threats. Finally, the sixth and most important step is lessons learned. During lessons learned, the entire team meets to honestly discuss exactly what went wrong and how to improve the security posture so that this specific type of attack can never happen again. If the security incident involves criminal activity, you must perform digital forensics to gather legal evidence. Digital forensics requires strict adherence to a chain of custody document. The chain of custody is a legally binding log that records exactly who collected the evidence, who handled it, where it was stored, and how it was protected at every single moment. If there is even one unexplained gap in the chain of custody, the evidence can be completely thrown out of court by a judge. When collecting digital evidence, investigators must perfectly follow the order of volatility. The order of volatility dictates that you must collect the most fragile, temporary data first before it disappears forever. Therefore, you always capture data from the computer memory and the processor cache first, because that information vanishes the second the computer loses power. Only after the fragile data is secured should you move on to collecting more permanent data from solid hard drives and remote backup tapes. While incident response handles targeted cyber attacks, disaster recovery handles massive, catastrophic disruptions like hurricanes, earthquakes, or company-wide ransomware infections. The goal of disaster recovery is to survive the worst-case scenario. Two critical metrics drive every disaster recovery plan, and you must know them perfectly. These metrics are the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective, and they dictate exactly how your backups and recovery sites must be engineered. The recovery time objective is a measurement of time, specifically the absolute maximum amount of downtime the business can tolerate before it goes completely bankrupt. The recovery point objective is a measurement of data, specifically the maximum amount of historical data the business is willing to lose in a disaster. If your recovery point objective is 4 hours, it means your backup systems must be scheduled to save a new copy of the data at least every 4 hours to prevent unacceptable financial losses. To meet strict recovery time objectives, companies use alternate processing sites, starting with a hot site. A hot site is an exact, fully functional duplicate of your main data center that receives continuous live data replication and can take over operations in a matter of minutes, making it incredibly fast but extremely expensive. A warm site has the hardware installed but needs the most recent data restored, meaning it takes a few days to become operational. A cold site is just an empty building with electricity, requiring weeks to set up, but it is very cheap to rent. Disaster recovery relies heavily on reliable data backups, and you will be tested on the 3 primary backup types. A full backup copies absolutely everything, which takes a very long time to perform but is extremely fast to restore during an emergency. A differential backup copies everything that has changed since the last full backup. An incremental backup copies only the files that have changed since the very last backup of any kind, making it the fastest to perform daily, but the slowest and most complex to restore when a server crashes. Having a written disaster recovery plan is useless unless you actively test it to ensure it actually works. The simplest test is a tabletop exercise, where the management team sits in a conference room and merely discusses how they would react to a hypothetical disaster scenario. The most aggressive test is a full interruption test, where you intentionally shut down the primary live data center to force the company to actively fail over to the backup site. Full interruption tests provide the most realistic proof of readiness but carry a massive risk of accidentally causing a real outage. Finally, security operations includes the physical management and disposal of media. When computer hardware reaches the end of its useful life, you cannot simply throw it in the trash, because hackers routinely dig through dumpsters for old hard drives. You must securely sanitize the media by using cryptographic wiping or physical destruction. For highly classified military data, the only truly acceptable method of data destruction is physically feeding the hard drive into an industrial shredder until it is reduced to tiny pieces of metal. I want to sincerely congratulate you for completing the 5th section of this rigorous course. You now have a masterful understanding of security assessments, incident response, and disaster recovery operations. To ensure these critical operational concepts stick in your memory, please take the time to complete the attached practice test. Actively testing your knowledge immediately after reading is the secret to retaining these details for exam day. The practice test is included right here with this lesson for your convenience. Keep pushing forward with this great energy, and I will see you in our final section where we master software development security. Welcome to the sixth and final section of our course, where we tackle software development security and advanced exam mastery. In this lesson, you will learn the core principles of building secure software from the ground up and the psychological strategies required to pass the actual certification exam. This topic is incredibly important because poorly written, vulnerable software is one of the largest attack vectors hackers use to breach global organizations today. Get ready to shift your mindset towards secure coding practices and learn exactly how to approach the most difficult questions on exam day. Take a deep breath, focus your attention, and let us cross the finish line of your preparation journey. We begin with the software development lifecycle, which is the structured process organizations use to design, build, and maintain software applications. Historically, developers used the waterfall model, which is a highly rigid, sequential approach where one phase must completely finish before the next phase begins. In the waterfall model, the design phase is completed entirely, then passed to the coding team, and it is incredibly difficult and expensive to go backward if a major mistake is discovered later in the process. Because the waterfall model is so rigid, modern organizations heavily favor agile development methodologies. Agile is a highly flexible, iterative approach that breaks software development down into very short cycles known as sprints, which usually last just a few weeks. This allows developers to constantly adapt to changing business requirements and release small updates continuously. However, because Agile moves so incredibly fast, security professionals must work extremely hard to ensure security testing is not skipped in the rush to release new features. To solve the problem of skipping security, the industry adopted a vital concept called shifting left. If you imagine a timeline of software development moving from left to right, testing usually happens at the very end on the right side. Shifting left means pulling security testing as far left on the timeline as possible, integrating it directly into the initial design and daily coding phases. You must remember for the exam that fixing a security flaw during the early design phase is massively cheaper and easier than fixing that same flaw after the software is released to the public. To measure how well a company manages its software processes, we use the Capability Maturity Model Integration Framework. This framework evaluates an organization on a scale from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 is the initial phase, where development is chaotic, undocumented, and relies entirely on individual heroics to get things done. Level 5 is the optimizing phase, where the organization uses advanced statistical data to continuously improve their highly documented and automated development processes. When it comes to the actual vulnerabilities found in software, the Open Web Application Security Project, known as OWASP, is the global authority. OWASP publishes a famous top 10 list of the most critical web application security risks. For the exam, you must be deeply familiar with these specific web vulnerabilities and exactly how developers are supposed to prevent them. The most common and dangerous vulnerabilities on this list typically involve different forms of injection attacks, where untrusted data is sent to the server. SQL injection is one of the most destructive web vulnerabilities in existence. In a SQL injection attack, a hacker types malicious database commands directly into a standard web form, such as a username or search box. If the software is poorly written, the database gets confused, treats the hacker's input as a legitimate command, and can accidentally reveal or delete the entire customer database. To prevent SQL injection, developers must strictly use input validation and parameterized queries to safely isolate the user input from the database logic. Another extremely common web vulnerability is cross-site scripting, often referred to as XSS. In this attack, a hacker injects malicious, invisible JavaScript code into a trusted website, like a public comment section. When an innocent user visits that page, their web browser unknowingly runs the malicious script, which can secretly steal their session cookies and hijack their logged-in account. The ultimate defense against cross-site scripting is strict input validation and proper output encoding, which neutralizes the script before it reaches the victim's browser. You must also understand cross-site request forgery, which is slightly different but equally dangerous. In a cross-site request forgery attack, a hacker tricks a victim into clicking a hidden link that forces their web browser to execute an unwanted action on a website where they are currently authenticated. For example, the hidden link might force the victim's bank account to secretly transfer money to the hacker. Developers prevent this by using unique, randomized anti-forgery tokens for every single transaction to prove the user actually intended to perform the action. Moving away from web applications, a massive vulnerability in compiled software like C or C++ is the buffer overflow. A buffer overflow occurs when an application receives more data than its allocated memory block can physically hold. The excess data violently spills over into adjacent memory blocks, potentially overwriting legitimate system instructions with malicious code provided by the attacker. Developers entirely prevent buffer overflows by implementing strict bounds checking, which verifies the exact length of the data before trying to store it in memory. Modern software heavily relies on application programming interfaces, or APIs, to allow different computer systems to talk to each other. For example, a travel website uses an API to pull live flight prices directly from an airline database. Because APIs provide deep, programmatic access to critical systems, they are major targets for attackers. To secure an API, you must require strong authentication for every single request and implement strict rate limiting to prevent hackers from overwhelming the system with thousands of automated queries. Behind almost every application is a database, and you must understand basic relational database security. Relational databases use primary keys to uniquely identify a specific record, like a customer identification number, and foreign keys to link different tables together. To make a database efficient and secure, administrators use a process called normalization. Normalization simply means organizing the data logically to eliminate redundant, duplicate information, which ensures data integrity and makes it much easier to protect. When securing databases, you must defend against inference and aggregation attacks. Aggregation happens when a user takes multiple pieces of low-level, unclassified data and combines them to discover a highly classified secret. Inference happens when a user uses common sense and missing data to deduce a classified secret without actually seeing it. To combat these threats, administrators use polyinstantiation, which creates fake, decoy records in the database to confuse unauthorized users and hide the existence of the real, classified information. To ensure developers are writing secure code, organizations use two primary testing methods, starting with static analysis. Static application security testing evaluates the raw, underlying source code directly without ever actually running the program. It acts like a very advanced spell checker that highlights dangerous coding patterns and known vulnerabilities. Static testing is fantastic because developers can use it daily while they are typing, but it can produce many false alarms that waste time. The second method is dynamic analysis. Dynamic application security testing evaluates the software while it is actively running, fully simulating how a real hacker would attack the live application from the outside. A common dynamic testing technique is fuzzing, which involves shooting massive amounts of random, invalid, and unexpected data at the application to see if it violently crashes or handles the errors gracefully. Fuzzing is an incredibly effective way to discover brand new, previously unknown vulnerabilities in custom software. Now that we have covered the final technical topics, we must completely shift our focus to exam strategy, because knowing the facts is only half the battle. The absolute most important rule for the CISSP exam is that you must think like a manager, not a technician. When you see a problem, your first instinct should not be to instantly configure a firewall or patch a server. Your first instinct must be to assess the risk, review the corporate policy, and fix the underlying management process that caused the problem in the first place. When reading exam questions, you must pay extreme attention to capitalized keywords like most, least, best, and first. The exam designers frequently write questions where all four multiple-choice answers are technically correct, but only one answer is the absolute best choice from a high-level management perspective. Never just pick the first technical answer that looks familiar. Read every single option carefully, evaluate the business impact of each, and choose the answer that solves the root cause of the issue. There is one golden rule that overrides absolutely everything else on this exam. and that is human safety. Protecting human life is always the #1 priority of any security professional. If an exam question asks you how to handle a physical fire in the data center, the correct answer is never to grab a fire extinguisher to save the expensive servers. The correct answer is always to evacuate the personnel immediately and ensure their safety above all corporate assets. Finally, you must understand the computer adaptive testing format you will face on exam day. In an adaptive test, the computer constantly adjusts the difficulty of the questions based on whether you answered the previous question correctly. Because of this, you absolutely cannot go backward to review or change your previous answers. You must read each question twice, trust your preparation, make your absolute best decision, and immediately move forward without second-guessing yourself. Manage your time wisely, and stay calm even when the questions feel incredibly difficult. I want to sincerely congratulate you for completing the 6th and final section of our course. You have mastered software development security and learned the essential strategies needed to conquer the CISSP exam. To solidify everything we have just covered, please complete the attached practice test for this final section. Engaging with practice questions significantly improves your memory retention and ensures you are fully prepared for the real test environment. The practice test is included right here with this lesson, so please take advantage of it to reinforce your active learning. While this concludes our formal lessons, it naturally transitions you into your ultimate goal of sitting for the actual certification exam. End positively by trusting the deep knowledge you have built here, and I wish you absolute success in your professional security career.